Welcome to part 2 of our EduFuturism learning series on using AI without losing our humanity. This one, of course, exploring the many applications for ChatGPT for reading and writing classrooms, as Chris has up there. And we'll talk a bit more about what it is that we'll go through here as well. If you want to share the next thing, Chris, there we go. Yeah, I think we probably, yep, as a reminder, if you're using the Figma, there you go, Chris dropped it in the chat, but if you're new to Figma, you can familiarize yourself with it here in the Start Here section. And yeah, then as far as getting started with ChatGPT, if you want to have that open, and then you can feel free to click on the Figma and go through some of the other language model AI tools that we'll be using today as well. But for OpenAI and ChatGPT, you can just open the link. You can go ahead and log in using your Microsoft or Google account, and you can type in those prompts as you go. So if you want to follow along with us, either live here in person, or if you're watching the video afterwards, you can follow along with us in ChatGPT.
Links will be in the recording or in the description.
Yep, and the links will be in the description of the recording. And of course, a huge thank you to all of our donors, all of our supporters, all of our YouTube subscribers, all of our podcast listeners, all of our Discord members, everyone that is involved in this community. Just makes it so worthwhile and so awesome to be a part of. So thank you for joining us here today and liking, following, subscribing, doing all of that. And of course, we have our year-end funding drive, which is just ongoing for us really through the end of the year until we hit our funding goal. And we have some cool supporter gifts as we do every time, but I'm super stoked about these ones. For some reason, I just love I love the design and the print, which of course is brought to you by our commissioned artist, Farima, who's a Canadian artist who we commissioned for our artwork there as well. The $25 gets you a cool sticker. $50 donation gets you the awesome white on blue Restoring Humanity shirt, mugs, all three for $150. And you can see there what it is that we're trying to do with that money and those donations. So you can give any amount, but those larger amounts will unlock those larger tiers of supporter gifts. So thank you so much for that. And of course, who are we? We're the Human Restoration Project, if you didn't know. We're informing, guiding, and growing a movement toward progressive, human-centered education. And we're joined here today again by a rock star, educator, and author, Trevor Aleo. Do you want to introduce yourself a little bit, Trevor?
Hi, everyone. So I'll just do a quick intro rigmarole for those of you who are tuning in who did not watch the last session. So my name is Trevor Aleo. I'm a high school English teacher at Greenwich Country Day School in Fairfield, Connecticut. I am also one of the co-authors of Learning the Transfers, Designing Curriculum for a Changing World, and I'm currently a doctoral student at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, where I'm studying the intersection of youth literacies and disciplinary literacy in English language arts. So considering many English teachers feel like ChatGPT is doing to them what the calculator did to math teachers a few years ago, I've been experimenting with it in my local context and having lots of conversations with Chris and Nick about the implications for reading and writing. So I'm excited to jump into it with everyone today.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that's why we're so stoked to have Trevor, because he's got that on the ground experience in the moment with these new tools, and just excited to share those affordances, to borrow an oft-used phrase from Trevor there too. So yeah, what is it that we're going to talk about here today? If you just go down a little bit, Chris. In the last session, which you can find on our YouTube channel, or if you're on the Figma, you can find it here as well. We did just the basics, right? How does ChatGPT work? How and why you might use it, getting started with some basic use cases. But today we'll just dive right into the practical ways. Here's some tools that are AI language model related and also ChatGPT related that can either enhance creative writing, encourage critical thinking through interactive storytelling, offer personalized writing support, and improve language comprehension. So there's some pretty cool practical things that we hope you get out of this conversation. And all of this is ahead of, in, well, roughly 2 months' time, HRP at NCTE. There's a lot of acronyms there. 2023 in Columbus. And of course, we'll be doing a half-day workshop that really is just working hands-on, one-on-one, really in small groups with your colleagues, with each other, in how we can find a space for using these tools, using AI without losing ourselves again. So if you're heading to NCTE there at the end of November, make sure you sign up for a session because we'd love to meet you. We'd love to have you, and we'd love to talk through these things with you together.
We also do this work with schools. And I mean, at the end of the day, this is about not just how to use the tool, but take a critical lens to the tool. So it's beyond just prompt generation. It's also, what does this mean for education more broadly? How will it transform education? How can you use this with kids? How can you have discussions over it? It's a little bit more holistic approach to AI than just a list of prompts that you could utilize.
Right on. So let's get started.
All right. Starting off with Trevor, we're going to start off with talking about storytelling activities and ways that we can think about stories and English in different ways.
Yeah, so riffing on what Chris said, we're going to kind of provide an overview of different tools that one could use in their class. We're going to lean into the affordances of large language models and ChatGPT. However, we're going to have a whole other session on the ethics around AI next week, and last week we talked a little bit about how we can use this stuff with a critical lens. And we're going to try to give a little bit deeper, richer dive than the Twitter and LinkedIn threads that everybody is spamming right now, like 10 ways AI can streamline your workflow. So we're going to try to be a little bit more intentional with how we discuss it. So as an English teacher, as a teacher of writing and multimodal communication, the notion of mentor text is something that I feel like is incredibly important. There are a lot of people who are doing great work around mentor text. Allison Marchetti and Rebecca Odell had a recent book, A Teacher's Guide to Mentor Text 6 to 12. Angela Stockman does a bunch of stuff with multimodal mentor texts. And essentially, mentor texts are examples of writing that you aren't just giving your students to read for meaning, but to actually study the craft and design moves. Considering we live in an incredibly multimodal world, when I speak of mentor text, I'm not just talking about examples of, quote integration in an essay. I'm also talking about how a podcaster integrates music into their introduction. So how can we help students understand the repertoire of available design choices that they can use when they're producing in a certain form? We use mentor text. And the great thing about ChatGPT is generating and curating mentor text is incredibly rewarding, but good God, is it time consuming. As somebody who has done a lot of it myself, and even when I find curated lists that other people have created, it doesn't always necessarily speak to my context or my students. So ChatGPT has been great for that. So we're going to start by looking at ways that you can just generate mentor text. I'll start, guys. Let me pull up one so I have access to it. So one of the ways that we can do that is generating mentor text in a particular genre. So Chris, you can probably be easier if you copy and pasted the sentence frame.
So on my screen, I'll show this using ChatGPT. Cool. We'll make this work. All right. Yeah, give me 1 second.
Yeah, so while Chris is pulling that up, a way that we can get students thinking about how genres are generated. So a lot of the research and like genre studies and looking at genre theory, there are a lot of different conversations about like the social aspect of it, but from a purely textual perspective, genres have really distinct text structures that kind of inform and shape how we understand them. So for instance, every fairy tale begins with once upon a time, right? That's an incredibly obvious example, right? Arguments are constructed around claims, evidence, and reasoning, etc. So in order to kind of get that, if we want to generate some mentor text that students can study to get facility with a particular genre, we have this sentence frames. You are insert author information, write, insert genre, where you insert goal or purpose of writing. Be sure to include examples of specific skills or craft moves you want to practice to demonstrate how, insert explanation of how author uses that craft move based on the genre. All right, so let's see. So I was playing with this yesterday. I was having a conversation with our econ teacher. So I said, you are an economic journalist. And I said, write a feature article where you try to reflect the human cost of austerity economic policy. So one of our favorite...
putting austerity. I'm like, okay.
I'm an English teacher. I'm going to test that spelling. Okay, yeah, cool. And be sure to include examples of interviews to demonstrate how journalists use people to humanize abstract topics. So there's an economist whose work I like, Mark Blythe, and I was talking to my buddy who is our econ teacher about it. am interested in econ, but don't know a ton about it. So I was thinking that in his class, he wants the students to do some economic writing. He's talking about different philosophies of economic policy. So what would it mean to have his students write from a particular perspective using that? So this helps them understand the way that journalists take complex, disciplinary content and write it for a popular audience. And it also shows how journalists can humanize abstract topics, right? So by doing this, students are developing an understanding of the way that somebody with a particular disciplinary or professional orientation, in this case a journalist, is talking about this certain thing. And in a little bit, I'm going to talk about remixing. So another interesting thing to do would be to remix this and say, okay, how can you take these same ideas and then explore them in the form of like a white paper or a policy brief?
Should I type that in right now? Will it work?
Oh, sure. Go for it. Yeah, we'll be doing something similar later, but just to kind of get a peek at it. And to Nick's point, you can get ChatGPT to scale the reading level of this up or down. So obviously, I gave kind of a heady example, but you can scale it down and make it more accessible. You can scale up the language. I've asked it to like, okay, well, what would Mark Blythe, who was the author of this book that we were talking about, what would he have to say about this? Right. So we're kind of like seeing again this text structure to understand how we would explore the same content in a different genre. So I might be getting a little ahead of myself by jumping into that, but that's the gist. Sure. Okay, and I'll go through this next one quickly just because we have a lot of other stuff to get to. But when it comes to sentence frames, the prompt that I have is provide a list of sentence frames that students can use when trying to write like historian, scientist, and literary critic. Organize them based on how each discipline would construct a claim, integrate evidence, provide reasoning, and establish context. So a lot of my research focuses on disciplinary literacy. So looking at how people in different disciplines construct knowledge and write in particular, and getting students sort of onboarded onto those academic ways of constructing knowledge and writing can be a challenge. This is a really good way to give students little sentence kernels and stems that they can borrow and integrate into their argument. And the reason that I have the ChatGPT organize them based on purpose is I don't just want to be like, here's your, the sentence stem for your thesis, put it at this part in your essay and remove all agency, right? I want students to be like, I need to integrate evidence into my literary argument. What are some sentence stems that I might use? So that way it becomes a repertoire that they can kind of lean on. And through time exposure and repetition, they can kind of internalize these ways of constructing knowledge and making claims and integrating evidence. So we can see some of them up here. And one of my buddies at school, she worked in a laboratory for a while. She's big on the display literacy stuff from science since we've been talking about it. And she said, these are really great scaffolds for the type of writing that she was doing when she was writing, actually lab reports and stuff like that. So those are just some quick examples of how we can generate a bunch of different genre and sentence frames to use as mentor text. So curating, and we don't even really need to demonstrate this, Chris, just for time, but whenever I was trying to find paired text for a unit that I was doing, let's say that my center novel is Chinua Achebe's No Longer at Ease, which is something I'm going to talk about in a little bit. And I wanted to find what's an example from an example from literary theory that I could pull in, or what is a poem that I could pull in that's exploring the themes of colonization and alienation and hybridity. And it would generate a list of text for me. So I was like, oh, you could check out Frantz Fanon's Black Skin, White Mask. You could look at the poem The Mask by, I think, Paul Laurence Dunbar, I believe, and just kind of gave me a bunch of different texts. So in English right now, the idea of having layered multimodal text sets is really prevalent and popular. It's also in a lot of elementary levels too, to help kids kind of build knowledge and understanding. And instead of me scouring the interwebs and, looking and trying to find these, I can just generate them here. Same with sentence frames. Actually, I think Nick will probably be able to speak more to how you can curate them within an article when he does his Ask PDF later. If there is like a PDF that you have, you can upload it to this platform called Ask PDF and then ask it to kind of scour it for sentence stems and frames that kids can use and remix for their own purposes. So
right. And it's worth noting too that it's not like you're not checking that these things are accurate. It's more so giving you all of the templated material up front that you can then easily like double check later based off your own knowledge and then get copying and pasting in Google, etc. You're just kind of working the other way around. You're getting the completed document to check and see if it's accurate, as opposed to trying to find all the information and do it on the fly.
Yeah, it's all about streamlining.
All right. This is still you. Keep going.
Cool. All right. So we're going to talk about multimodal transpositions. I laugh when I saw that Chris put that in quotations. Transpositions is one of those annoying academic words that probably has a clear, term. But essentially, it's the idea that meaning can be communicated across different modes. And another probably obnoxious academic term is synesthesia, but I think that kind of like exists in the regular world too. It's the process of mode shifting, re-representing something from one mode to another that you can describe a scene in words, you can picture it in an image. Moving between modes, you can say more, say it differently, and say it more effectively. So this is from Mary Clancis and Bill Cope and their research on multiliteracies. And I've played with this a lot just in terms of getting kids to, produce print. Print is right now the dominant sort of like mode that we use in school. And while I think it's important for teachers to be aware of that and honor that and support kids' print literacies, we live in a multimodal world. And it's also equally important that they get some understanding of how these other modes work and function. And ChatGPT can kind of streamline that. So just as some examples, you can use visual generators like Midjourney and DALL-E 3 to produce visuals that can pair with students' writing. So these are two examples, one that I made and one that Chris and Nick actually made. So over the course of the year, in my class, my students have blogs where we kind of have conversations about texts that we're taking in class and reading, and then fandoms and popular culture they're consuming outside of class. So last year, reading Nella Larson's Passing, and I wrote a blog post called Working Indeed, Shame, Social Class, and Claire Kendry. And I used DALL-E 3, or maybe it was DALL-E 2 at the time, to create an image that I felt like was reflective of the content of my piece. And it can be pretty impressive. Some of the ones they generate are pretty creepy and macabre, but a lot of them do look pretty great. So in this one right here, we see an example of two women who are gossiping, and that was reflective of how I talk about gossip as a tool used by members of a higher social class in this novel in order to kind of like create different power dynamics. And what I'm going to have my students do this year is when they are blogging, I'm going to ask them to use a site like Midjourney or DALL-E 3 to create images. And just so this isn't window dressing, we can also have a conversation, and I'm going to have a conversation with my students about how we can intentionally create an aesthetic for their posts, so they have like a recognizable design scheme that people can kind of see as their own. So it's not just, oh, cool, add a pretty picture. Instead, it's how can you construct a sort of coherent aesthetic for the writing that you do and the blog post that you make, right? Oh, cool, some flowers in space. And the other one I felt like was a cool example. I wrote an article for a human restoration project over the summer, and Nick and Chris shared this really cool photo of these sort of like a classical looking folks all wearing VR goggles. And I was like, where'd you guys get this? This is really cool. And they're like, we used Midjourney to create it. So just another example of how we can bring together these modes. Okay. So I saw Chris jumping to this last one, so I'll try to go through this quick because we have so many of these to share. The other thing that it can do is to add layers of meaning to students' work. So what we're seeing here is an example of a video essay my student used. I cropped him out, and we have the audio muted for privacy purposes and copyright strike purposes. But he was doing a video essay about Chinua Achebe's No Longer at Ease. And he had also done some reading of Frantz Fanon's Black Skin, White Mask. So what we're seeing on the screen here is him kind of like talking through his thematic interpretation of the text. And folding in examples of, so we see text, we see image, and the really cool thing that unfortunately YouTube's draconian copyright policy is preventing us from hearing is in the background, he was playing Radiohead's Karma Police. And considering a lot of Frantz Fanon's work and the story of the main character, Obi is exploring the sort of loss of identity and alienation that comes with colonization. And the refrain at this part, as you can see on the screen, is the lead singer of Radiohead saying, "I've lost myself," over and over again. So it was a whole other additional layer of meaning on top of his already really powerful analysis. And considering the fact that the song is called Karma Police, and the play begins with Obi sort of judging the corruption that he sees in the Nigerian government and ends with him being arrested for that same corruption, even the title of the song itself adds another layer of meaning. So what ChatGPT does is it scaffolds and allows for a lot more complex, rich work to happen in a way that isn't going to, put learners in a position where it's incredibly hard or time consuming for them to do so. So, yep, go ahead. Looking at all of these examples so in your local context, if you have kids doing a video essay, ask them to create a song list that explores similar themes. And, the human part of this is it can't pick up on tone. So you probably don't want a happy ending to a whole video essay you're doing on colonization, right? So it can give you some ideas, but that human part of it is also key.
Yeah, I really like that one. I generated on the screen here a list of songs based off the economic policy thing that we were talking about earlier.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
So, like super fringe, but like the fact of the matter is probably the vast majority of kids don't know a lot of these artists. Like they're probably going to maybe know like Lorde, maybe like Cage the Elephant. But as we get into like Creedence Clearwater Revival or Destiny's Child even, it might expose them to new music types that they might not be familiar with.
I saw Boulevard of Broken Dreams when I was playing around with it earlier, which I thought would be a good one, like a little bit of little Green Day.
Yeah, they probably won't know what that is. I'll never forget last time I was in the classroom talking about. I think I was talking about The Matrix, and they were like, "What's that?" I was like, "Really? Like you don't know?" But yeah, I guess shifting over to mine now. So really, like 180 from what from what Trevor's talking about here in terms of. Almost not teacher facing, but certainly like curation and kind of like finding more academic nuanced ways to explore content. This is a way that I've seen a lot online, but not a lot of good ways that you could use it in a classroom of having kids tell creative stories and like live in a world in a way that would be very difficult to do as a teacher to design something like this. This is something that I feel like could only happen within the structure of ChatGPT. It really is incredible. So this is an activity you could use with kids to either have them practice writing or creative thinking or practice different types of storytelling, etc., either by engineering the prompt or by responding to the prompt. So the prompt comes in 3 different forms. You have a setup. In this case, they're talking about being a personal storyteller, about how they're going to guide me in this realm. You then design the rules right after that. And these could be modified. In this case, it says like, you need to ask me what to do next. So it doesn't just tell me the story. So I'm kind of guiding it. And every now and then give me suggestions on how to improve my writing. So it actually acts as a writer help along the way, a writer guide. And then finally, the start of the story. And again, kids could develop the start of the story. I just literally type some random thing about like some like wizard type stuff. So if I actually type this in, let's get that. Just copy and paste this into ChatGPT. Let me make a new chat so it doesn't get confused here. All right, so if I just put this in, and you can see here, it starts with that same prompt that I said before. It's pretty much the exact same thing. And at the end, it says, with a world of possibilities before you, how do you wish to begin your exploration? So as a kid, if I were doing this as an activity, I could do something like, I want to check out what's going on at the towering trees. I don't know. If I do that, you can see that it responds to me. It says that I do that, and then it just gives me more prompts. So it says like between the trees, I read this whole thing. What would you like to do next? Should you investigate these orbs of light or try to decipher the whispers in the air? And you could change the rules to be at different reading levels, to explore different types of things. You could have it play games with you. I just used this in a recent video to have it quiz me on things throughout the story. So like randomly ask me quiz questions about different content or review it. To me, if I were teaching English, I would certainly be exploring ways to use this for creative writing, because you could also export this at the end. You could screenshot it or copy and paste what you wrote, what the AI wrote, and have like this really cool long story that would happen quickly, right? And also, as Trevor says in the chat there, it could be an interesting way to do branching stories. So everybody starts with the same prompt, and then you all talk about different ways that you went through it. You can make a whole world out of it. Pretty neat. And you could reflect on that content. So again, relatively basic prompt, but it opens up a lot of things that you wouldn't typically be able to do. All right, let's talk about, we got quite a few more. So let's keep going.
All right, so remixing and transposing. So the thing that I want to kind of center here is this idea of rhetorical agility or rhetorical flexibility. And a big issue with the way that writing is often taught is it's devoid of any audience. And the problem with that is writing outside of the world of school, audience and purpose are the number one things that matter. So how can we use ChatGPT as a way to think more productively and more authentically about audiences, as well as the types of text that those audiences like to produce and consume? So we can see here a quick prompt that I have. Take this, insert genre here, written for insert audience and purpose, and remix it for new audience and purpose. So we could like put in a website. We could just put in, try to think, Chris, as we do this on the fly. Okay, so we could do, how about like the story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears? We can just do kind of a fun one since my last one felt like it leaned a little to the academic.
Is this Goldilocks? Is Goldilocks one word?
It's a great question. And is it Y or?
Yes. Goldilocks.
I don't know.
I only know this
I've
because
never
my kids are
written that
8 and
out.
5.
All right, Goldilocks and the Three Bears, written for.
I feel like I'm like channeling the ghost of an English teacher that's haunting you, Chris, with all these spelling.
Written for children.
Written for children, and like remix it as like, how about like a horror story in the style of M. Night Shyamalan?
Can we stop with the craziest spelled word? How do I spell M. Night Shyamalan?
that wasn't even on purpose. I would just look that up. Yeah,
there it is. Shyamalan. All right.
Good. And you could even say, how about in a horror style script?
Horror style script.
Mm-hmm.
All right. That's very funny.
Abandoned cabin. That sounds about right.
This is amazing. So a more like applicable use case for this is my students are currently reading Arthur Miller's The Crucible in class, and they're going to need to write a sort of a short film themselves that is looking at some of the similar themes of The Crucible in a different context. So, you know, my students don't have a lot of experience writing scripts, so they could take some ideas, plug it here, and then kind of get like the beginning gist of how these are structured in terms of understanding what a script is, how it functions, and then, you know, add in their own kind of flavor and spice to keep it more in line with whatever ideas they're exploring. So
right. And also analyze and see whether or not it adds up, because in this case, there's no twist. I can't see any twist here, and that's like a pretty key element of any M. Night Shyamalan film. So
this is true. Yeah. Like what is M. Night Shyamalan without the, maybe I haven't seen any of his movies since probably The Village. So who knows? So another way to think about this is if we want to get down even more into the nitty gritty of audiences and genres, we can talk about how what ChatGPT does as a large language model is it scrapes a whole bunch of text and it sort of recognizes those patterns and structures. And we talk about that a lot in the other video. But what it doesn't understand is social context. So these are like the social dimensions and uses of language. So it might be able to rewrite your homework in the style of a Taylor Swift song, which is something that I thought of for this session and I'm definitely going to do next week in class. It doesn't know how to talk or write like a Swiftie, right? It doesn't understand the conventions or patterns of that discourse because it's constantly evolving in online spaces. And unless ChatGPT is scraping the entire internet every single day, including video, you know, including like cell phone information as people are having these chats, it's not going to know. Something that you could have your students do is to write a sort of generic article about a topic that they're passionate about that's associated with whatever fandoms that they're in. And when I say fandom, it could be anything from being a Swiftie to being a Steelers fan to being a fan of a certain American Horror Story, like literally any type of community where people are engaged in shared analysis and discussion of a topic. So the for a time we can, or whatever you think, Chris, we can or don't have to do this. I was going to ask it to write a feature article about Chelsea Football Club's 2012 Champions League winning match against Bayern Munich. So as a Chelsea fan, that was a really important big moment for me. And I'm sure that it would provide kind of an overview of the match, but I don't think what it would be able to communicate is a deeper understanding of sort of the human elements of that. So I was in like a packed bar in DC with a bunch of strangers watching this match. And when Didier Drogba, who was the star striker at the time, scored a header to put Chelsea into overtime, I hugged just a large group of sweaty dudes who I've never met before in my life. And we basically cried together because it was such a powerful moment. And it's the sort of thing that ChatGPT can't reproduce. It can't talk about the experience of a person who was there having it happen. It's not going to be referencing historical players like Peter Osgood, who was sort of seen as like a Chelsea legend, he's seen as like the king. It's not going to know those sort of subtle references and cues to the club's history, to some of the discourse that was happening online about the prospects of the team. So it gives you a really generic overview of what happened in the game in a factual sense, but it captures no affective piece, no emotion, no humanness, and no sort of awareness of the way that how Chelsea soccer fans are going to talk about that match. So it's really good at setting up like the structure, but then as a person, you know, how can you inject a sense of humanity into it?
For sure. Speaking of becoming more human.
Yeah. Let's talk about becoming more human. So yeah, a lot of times the question is, right, what is the role of human thought and human thinking and collaboration if the machine can simply just come up with the answers? And really the response to that is, well, let's use these AI language tools, be they ChatGPT, or we'll talk about this other tool that Trevor introduced to us called TextFX, as a starting point that actually just helps kickstart the creative process. And you'll see, Chris, if you could just go to the ChatGPT and maybe pick one of those prompts that we could use, and say, you know, you could either be having this as a personal project, or I know Chris picked the one, there we go, that we would actually have to work on here. So yeah, if you were having kids work in some kind of genre or performance about rap lyrics, of course you would want to have them look at rap lyrics and kind of how the cadences and functions work. But then you can also just have this be a useful starting point for it. Now, I wonder if you could too, Chris, would it even be feasible to say, like, write it in the style of a particular rapper? Because I wonder how it could take that original prompt and the original rap and rework it in the style of Mos Def. And of course, you'd have to have, I love grilled cheese sizzling in the pan, butter and bread, part of my master plan.
That's
okay, but whatever. So yeah, it's just one.
I mean,
way
this is nothing like Mos Def.
Mos
Def probably wouldn't rap on in the kitchen. Mos Def style can't be beat. That's what they added.
I wonder if someone with a more like pronounced style, like Snoop Dogg or Eminem, maybe.
Well, that again, what we're highlighting here is also then the critical element, just to say, like, okay, the machine isn't giving us the feedback that it doesn't understand it enough. It's the same rap. It just includes the name Snoop Dogg's grilled cheese taking flight tonight.
Yeah, well, this just shows to my earlier point, it doesn't know how to like pick up on the subtleties of like people who are in the hip hop community would know that's not how Snoop raps.
Now, I'm just rolling with this. Now, Chris, before you get into this next prompt, what you could do then for kids to understand lyricism, to understand style, to understand what makes those artists characteristic of each other, is you could take that original prompt and have students rewrite it on their own in the style of rappers perhaps that they know, or choose from a list or whatever. Like, that's how you can fit it into a broader analysis of, again, style, prose, flow, rhyme, whatever aspect of lyricism that you're looking at. So there's a lot of ways. I mean, Chris and I have used this a lot too, just to generate lists of words, almost like an interactive dictionary or a thesaurus. If we're trying to come up with the name for a project or the name of a video, there we go. A new education project. Nice, Acorn. Not controversial at all. And again, it might just even give you some words, say curriculum. Okay, curriculum, online resource network. That's cool. Augmented, not so, the augmented one I'm not so hip with. So maybe we'll just have it be like, hey, drop the augmented, but leave the curriculum online resource network.
And then it gave me CornNet.
CornNet. Okay. So see, it has to, you have to work with it. It's not going to give you, I love CornNet though. As an Iowan, I just have to say this appeals to my Midwestern sensibilities. So, so there's one way that you can plug a lot of different prompts into there just as a starting point. A lot of them work, a lot of them don't. But at least you get to use your human reason, intuition, experiencing creativity. Then
that's sort of the point, is that it doesn't work.
Yes, exactly. Yep. It's not going to give you the answers. So TextFX is actually this really cool program. I don't know, Trevor, if you want to speak like in 30 seconds to its origins, because I'm less sure of it, but you seemed to think it had a really cool origin story when you introduced this tool to us.
Yeah, I saw Google Lab sessions and AI, and I'll be honest, I was quite skeptical at first. But it sounds like Lupe Fiasco was like really involved in the creation of it. And originally they showed an interview with the engineers, and they were like assuming that Lupe was basically going to want to create an AI version of himself. Like, hey, like write raps in the style of Lupe Fiasco, and they'll have access to Lupe's discography to do that. But what he said, no, 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 no. I know how to rap like Lupe, and other people rapping like me is not going to help. So what he did is he kind of looked at some like the core, I guess, like skills and wordplay elements within hip hop. And actually, Chris, if you could go up to really quick, because I think that like listed them out. So things like, how can you use alliteration, fuse, unfold the moment, create similes, explode a moment, and these kind of became prompts or skills that they were able to I guess use to really dig into the wordplay. So I'll let you take it from here in terms of how it actually plays out.
No, that's great.
Played with it yet.
So basically what this does then, it simplifies the work of ChatGPT, where in ChatGPT you might have to say like, generate alliteration around the word microphone or something, Chris, since you have alliteration open here. And then on the right, you can, we can stick with A or whatever. The temperature function there is the creativity of the prompt. So you can ratchet that up and down. So you can, microphone, MIDI, West, magnetic microphone, magnetometer, megahertz. You can check out the whole list there. But essentially, it's a language prompt that's like, hey, generate alliterative M words for microphone. And it just helps kickstart that process. Chris, if you want to pick anything else here, you could say like walking the dog or something. Just something banal is what I'm thinking about. Run
just
that.
Really quick too, the Mae West reference, I just looked it up. She's an American actress, singer, comedian, screenwriter. I'm wondering if there's something to do with like mics with her work, or if she's like a hip hop person that's referenced in hip hop is sort of like a classical allusion. So I'm also wondering or assuming that it has some knowledge of like the discourse within the hip hop community, and it's bringing in pop cultural references that are in other songs, which I don't think ChatGPT would do as well.
Yeah, that's a great point, Trevor. To look at the generating the unexpected scene is kind of cool too, just in the sense of generating different prompts, different lists. If you just want writing prompts for kids to riff off of, say that there's some kind of quick write activity or something that you just want to think imaginatively about, it's essentially like an improvisational tool. Be like, okay, walking the dog. So generate a scene where you're walking the dog on rollerblades, or the dog that's a 700-pound grizzly bear, walking a dog on the moon. And you could have kids start to go through whatever processes you have in your classroom to generate those creative ideas. And I didn't see what the next one was, Chris, that you had done.
I did chaining, so it does semantically related items.
Oh, cool. Yeah, just to get you to think about other words related to walking the dog. Home, house, kitten, ball, pet, store.
I could even see use here like an elementary classroom too. You could use this to generate as a teacher angle, like what do all these words have in common? And then like talking about it that way, but also from a student angle, if students were using this, forget the teacher angle, having them kind of play around with it and figure out how they could use these things, what it could be used for, the practicality of it, etc.
Yeah, I love the idea too of just starting with the prompt and getting kids to make meaning of it, because really it's the AI tool on this side that's saying, hey, these are related words. But if you just gave them the outcome of that and basically asked the same thing, in what ways are these words related? That could be a really neat way just to get, insight into student perspectives, opinions, how these ideas are related culturally, semantically, all those other kinds of things here too. And now, Chris, I see that you have unfolded a word as well. What is the unfolding?
It just takes the word and figures out other words that are inside of it, which in the case of dog, it has like phrases, but also like dog house, dog fight, etc.
Nice. Dog pile, dog tag, dog eared. Yeah.
I mean,
so basically, I really like too just how it seems like perfectly safe for work, probably safe for school, a lot like ChatGPT is as well. So, and from what I can tell too, TextFX is free, doesn't have any restrictions.
It's free.
Yes, for people to be able to use, either for you as a teacher to use, you could use it live with students in the moment on projected onto a screen. You could have students use it.
All the stuff that we're using is free too. Like we're using ChatGPT 3.5. Like all this stuff is freely available.
Yeah.
to speaking to what Nick was saying earlier about letting kids kind of run with the text effect tool, I think about the number of students I've taught who are just like, I can't do poetry, or like, I don't like poetry. And it's really what the only thing that is actually lacking is just a sense of trust and comfort in the form, and B, this flexible semantic kind of like word knowledge and play. And I think that this is, instead of kids just staring at a blank screen and waiting for, the poem to erupt out of their heart and onto the page, this gives them a really good prompt to begin. So I totally could see the affordances of any grade level, any age, just letting kids kind of go nuts and explore how language is a flexible tool for meaning making and letting them make something cool.
Yeah, very funny. I like how this explode one, which is supposed to do like basically rhyming words or alliterative words, is also confused by English because the past tense of ate is not at, but it thinks it is. So cat ate.
Oh, that's funny.
Right. But it doesn't understand that. But regardless, unless I'm just reading that wrong. Okay. Anyways, so going over then to something a little different, but it is related. This whole theme of the ones that we're talking about here is the difference between using AI just as like a prompt and then just forgetting about it and saying like ChatGPT is going to replace the world versus using AI to supplement the work that we're already doing in interesting ways. And to take that to the next level, something that you might want to consider is, well, where do we end up as a result of using AI in society at large? And some people are predicting this point of a post-truth society. And you could argue that we're already in a post-truth society, that people don't know where their information is coming from. It doesn't necessarily matter that they know where their information is coming from, and we can't confirm what's real, fake, or an impersonation. The leverages of this idea of technology, whether it be AI through chat or audio or video, could get us to the point where we really can't tell what's real and what's fake. So we can use with students a variety of different starting points to have these conversations and have them think critically about consuming AI, consuming information on the internet, the news, etc. So I have a bunch of tools listed on here that potentially could be used. The first, over deepfakes, which are going to become more and more prevalent, and they'd be fun to use with kids just in and of themselves. These are all free, at least to start. So Fake You, if I open this, this is a text-to-speech generator, and it's available for free to start. You have to like wait for it. But you can see here, I could type in something like, I'm amazing or whatever. And then here, if I click down, maybe, oh, there it goes. I can get it in like a bunch, like Shrek. I can get it in the Spanish Shrek. I could get it as Shakira. I could do it as Senator Armstrong, et cetera, et cetera. And it will attempt to read it in that voice. I'll do Rudy Giuliani. Now, the issue is it does take a little bit of time to queue it up. I'll leave this on in the background and demonstrate as it's loading, but it usually does a pretty decent job. There's also Synthesia, I believe is how you pronounce that, which takes text and makes it into video. It's kind of uncanny valley and freaks me out a little bit, but this is an AI generated person. And again, here you can create a free version of this. You type in text at the bottom and it will make a person saying that thing that's completely AI generated. And the purpose of this, if you've ever seen the video of like the fake Morgan Freeman or something on YouTube, is to get into how can we tell what's real versus what's fake? Does it matter what's real and what's fake? And then what does that mean for how we consume knowledge? I feel like in the last 10 years, there's been a big push for dissecting misinformation via memes or Facebook posts or whatever that might be in classrooms. Well, this takes it to a whole new level. How do you know that what you heard was real? How do you know the video is real? Et cetera, and really making sure that you don't take things at face value. Let's see how this sounds. Yeah, pretty good. Sounds like Rudy Giuliani to me, but it gets the overall idea. So that's deepfakes. You could also consider this from a written angle. The fact that many websites are written entirely by AI, and worth noting too that AI has been assisting with writing articles, especially in the economic sector, like stock markets, even before ChatGPT became mainstream. That's been a thing. But there are websites. This is just a Guardian article that has entire websites that are written by AI. Like you can see this has like the weird AI generated images. The topics are generated by AI. It's entirely just automated. And this article, which is great from the Technology Review, talks about this AI powered internet. Jeez. talks about this AI powered internet. That's through MIT. And just how scary it would be as more and more of our content becomes completely generated by artificial intelligence. So again, getting into the issues with just like plugging everything into ChatGPT and turning it in as your assignment, and the long-term implications of a society that's built like that. Finally, we kind of all might be familiar, especially if you watched our last session, about this idea of AI hallucination. Part of the issue with using large language models is that they tend to present their information with this very fact of a matter tone. Unlike when you do research online and you can tell where your information is coming from, ChatGPT and other models like it will just say, this is what it is. Like the example of that, if I go back to this TextFX thing, like 8 rhymes with cat. It doesn't know that 8 doesn't rhyme with cat. It just presents that as fact. We have to just know that. So even as the models improve, that's still going to keep happening. So something that you can do with kids to help demonstrate this is finding up creative ways to force the AI to get something wrong, which could also just be an interesting challenge with kids to try to get them to figure out how to make it hallucinate. And this especially is the case with like complex problems and riddles, where it's like wordplay, slang, and idioms, as Trevor was alluding to earlier, like fandoms, having it make things like tier lists or use language from like a certain video game or book or movie. Any kind of like complex theory, and then specific information, because it's an archive of specific information that existed on the internet before a certain place and time. If you try to ask it like, hey, what just happened in the news? Sometimes it will tell you that, hey, I don't have access to that information, but sometimes it'll just make something up too, and it's just not real at all. And then just getting into the long-term implications of this and why it's a tool, not a system, right? It's something that we use to assist us, but it's not going to take over education or any of these fields. So can it be useful in research? Sure. Could it be useful in the medical and doctor office field? Sure. But I also wouldn't want my doctor, nor you, if you're trained to be a doctor, to solely rely on ChatGPT to diagnose me. That would be very scary. So we get to have those critical conversations. The purpose of activities like this is so it's not just, hey, we're not going to use ChatGPT for this assignment. It's, hey, let's have a long conversation about why we don't always use ChatGPT and practice using prompts and essays and content beyond it because of X, Y, and Z here. But with that said, then diving into like the research element, how could you use it? I've been obsessed with this tool, Elicit, which is kind of free. It's free to start, then you have to pay for it after that. However, if you were using it with kids, I mean, you could probably find a way to make this work. I've used this tool organizationally now for a while, ever since it came out. It's called Elicit. Elicit is ostensibly, let me log into my my account, is ostensibly Google Scholar with AI integration. It can extract information from PDFs and can discover concepts. But what I like to use it for is, if I can get this here, here we go. I can say, like, do dogs make people happier? Right. And it will search only academic sources. So it's not using the internet at large. It's only using papers from research journals. And once this loads, which hopefully will be quickly, it will not only summarize the papers that exist, but it will also find concepts and ideas. This is not the thing I'm looking for, though. Maybe I wanted the third one. This one, sorry. Do dogs make people happier? This is the one I wanted. So it will show me not only the abstracts of the papers, it will show me how much data was collected. It will show me the type of data that was collected. So you can see here, these are different papers that are written about if dogs make people happier. It summarizes at the top to the best of its ability different papers and kind of answers the question. It says that, owning a dog is associated with increased happiness, and here's 4 articles that demonstrate so. It shows me the summary of the abstract here across the top. I can download this as a research list as well as a CSV. And what's also cool is that if I click on one of these, sometimes, and it might not show it for all of them, but every now and then it will actually tell you if the information's available. It apparently isn't on these, how many people were actually like surveyed to find this information out. And you can see it also has like the links. So I could actually just go to this paper and download it here. Public perceptions of Australian assistance dogs. So, etc. So that's Elicit. Do note as well that if you wanted to, you can integrate that almost directly into ChatGPT. There's a bunch of plugins if you have the paid version like Lit Maps and Science, where ChatGPT will get better and actually provide citations to the topics. Personally, I would just go with Alyssa because I think it's better, but that's there. So again, this just helps us with kids consider like, how can we use this to make ourselves better researchers? How can we consider like, what's the point of the abstract? How do I actually read scientific papers? What are the dangers of this? We can use AI to help us think differently about questions about sourcing and finding data. So like we already, I think, have that idea of, you should only trust .org websites when you're researching something, which is not entirely accurate. Well, now it's like, you can't just trust AI either to answer those questions for you, and getting into the semantics of that and talking about how and why we do research. So that's an overview of some research stuff there, both for personal use, but also for classroom use. All right.
Cool. So my last little blurb here is going to be thinking about how AI can serve as a thought partner. And I like the term used by Copenhagen. It's a cognitive prosthesis. So of course, a prosthesis doesn't necessarily like do all the work of a limb, but it supplements it enough that it becomes a little bit more functional. And I've explored this a little bit more from like a teacher perspective, but just generally speaking, a lot of times what students struggle with when it comes to writing is the blank page. So ChatGPT can be a great way to just generate ideas. I'm going to have a whole bunch of examples of things that they could do. Also, if they just want a general overview of a topic and they feel like, Wikipedia isn't cutting it, the prompt that I have is just write an article explaining a topic, person, concept, etc. And then that's accessible for insert grade level. So if you look for the teachers section, I have been experimenting with having my 10th graders use literary theory this year. And once you strip out the jargon, they actually are a lot better at analyzing literature once they understand some of these big themes and ideas. But the language that theory is presented in is often so dense and inaccessible that it's basically impossible. So I'll find a concept that'll be really helpful for a student to understand something like alienation. And just say like write a summary of the concept of alienation that is targeted towards a 10th grader. And if on these one pagers that I have these key concepts within these different literary or theoretical schools, and a lot of them are links to ChatGPT text that essentially summarize it in a way that I feel like is helpful. So it's a really good way to help kids kind of understand, kind of get access to complex ideas, topics, concepts in a way that's accessible. So I know that a lot of English teachers use tools like Newsela or Newsela, never know how to pronounce that correctly, where it recalibrates the lexile level, and you can kind of do the same thing here. Just looking at brainstorming, I've used it to come up with titles for units. If I'm thinking about how accessible a concept or a lesson is, one of the ways that I'm about to use it tomorrow is I have graded a bunch of my students' papers, and I realized that they were kind of struggling with too much summary and not enough analysis of that summary. So I'm going to have it like come up with some sample lessons to like fill that knowledge gap. And it's just like a really good kind of like time-saving tool. I'm going to have it generate some examples of sentences that have too much summary, not enough analysis, and then have students go back and correct them. So it's really good at just sort of streamlining those processes and getting ideas for when I'm feeling stuck. If you're having a tough day, your creativity's in the ditch, you can really easily just have your students hop on ChatGPT and generate ideas. And for teachers who are concerned that they'll outsource too much of that meaning making to ChatGPT, you can have them turn in a sort of a history or like a photo of their prompt history. So you can make sure that they were using it for the power of supplementing their cognition and not replacing it.
All right. That brings us to ask your PDF. I think I'll have to defer to you guys to talk about some of the more clever or creative ways to use this, because as I was playing around with it, maybe it's just that you uploaded, what is this document? But basically what Ask Your PDF does is it reads, it indexes, and you can interact with a PDF much in the same way that you can interact with a large language model like ChatGPT. So if you didn't have time to go through a document, or you wanted to pull out some excerpts or citations or things like that, you can actually just engage with Ask Your PDF on this front. And as you can see here, it says it's a document assistant. It gives you a summary of the research if you were uploading research or the text that you're uploading there. And actually generates for you some possible questions. So I found that helpful, because I was like, I don't even know really what to ask of the text. So I thought that was pretty great as well. And Chris, if you just ask anything about it so people can see what the next level is. One thing that I thought was pretty cool is that it actually generates citations from the text based on what it is that you ask it. So you don't have to take its word for it on what you find. There you go. So for example, Chris asked it this question. Here's how it responds to how did the researchers determine the user's happiness based on images and captions. But then you can actually see, hey, source is page 1. Well, that's very helpful. But here's where I was really struggling and thought you guys could maybe help me come up with some more use cases for this, or to see what other kinds of questions to ask. I think because I'm a pretty fluent text reader, article reader person. Yeah, what are you guys' thoughts on?
This is for kids, not for me.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So I don't help me understand.
Well, you could say it like, write a summary of this paper so that I can understand it, like AKA like explain like I'm 5 or whatever.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if it will actually.
Yeah, let's see if it. I tried to break it, and I really couldn't get far enough to try and get it to.
So like right here, it just gives you an overall idea of what this thing is about. It cites it, etc. But like I oftentimes would have kids write research papers in our class. I'm pretty sure that in 9th grade they had to write a research paper in American history, and it's really easy to say, use an academic source from Google Scholar or whatever, but those papers are written in a way that I struggle to understand what it's even talking about. So like Trevor was talking about earlier, being able to plug something into ChatGPT and have it synthesize that information and write at a different level. What's nice about this is not only does it do that, but it gives you the citations, but it also doesn't pull in information that it doesn't know. It's like I can't say like, can you tell me what impact this has on bird ownership? In theory, this should tell me it can't.
Yeah, and I really think it comes down to, if we want our students doing authentic work within a discipline, we need them to engage with like the genres and the text types that are used. One of my colleagues is like wants her kids reading more like scientific research papers before they write their own. But to Chris's point, sometimes it can be really inaccessible, right? It sounds good to, oh yeah, kids are going to read primary documents, and then they're reading like the first few lines of a research paper or a primary historical source, and they're like, I have no idea what's going on. So it can really kind of help like summarize and streamline and kind of bring stuff in, and like we see with the prompt right here, it's not going to hallucinate or make anything up. It's also just like a good time saver. Maybe a kid found, I have like 30 articles that I found that are exploring, the scientific phenomena, and like I don't know how many of them would like have this information I need. It can allow you to really streamline that process. So I think it's more about like efficiency in terms of like having kids engage with these potentially more challenging primary sources, but then also giving them the tools and scaffolds that they need to use it. Personally, I've been using it for my literature review. It's been like saving me a lot of time just to sort through a bunch of articles. So
that's great. Yeah, no, I love how it gives you the page breakdown, so you can actually get a summary going into it. So even as students or as adult learners, like you're using it, Trevor, you can see here, oh, here's what page 7 is actually about. It's using examples of demographics extracted from the faces.
Right. We can also
interesting. Cool.
And it tells you like what the figure is as well. It's got like cool like data on it, etc. Like it still needs to be verified, but this tool doesn't pull again from outside information, so therefore it's going to be much more accurate than another tool. It's no different than any other online tools that you would have kids use. If you taught them how to use Google Scholar, well, now here's another tool you can teach them how to use that also could assist them. in interesting ways that you couldn't do before.
Yeah. Hey, and if you're a user of this tool and you have a particular way that you've used it, just drop it in the replies or let us know. Again, our goal with these is just to provide some breadth, to find tools, of course, for people to be able to use in their own context and to be able to think critically about these too. Chris, do you want to talk about additional resources and then see us out?
Yeah. So these are the same resources we mentioned in our last video, but to quickly summarize, UNESCO just put out this really good overview of AI that talks about very similar things to what we are, specifically focused on research is a huge element of it. So you can dive into that and see how researchers are being guided to use generative AI. Angela Stockman, who Trevor referenced earlier, put out this amazing guide. It's on Canva that goes through a lot more activities that you could do, as well as this university, Thompson Rivers University, has a really cool AI page up in friends up north in Canada. We have lessons on AI. We have one about just giving kids a general overview and then diving into the biases of it in terms of image generation. We also interviewed Dr. Meredith Broussard, who wrote a book called More Than a Glitch, which I have right here, which is about bias and implications of using technology in this way. Again, we're going to be at NCTE in November, so if you can join us, that'd be awesome. And we'll be talking about this in a lot more detail. There's also this really cool guy. This is from Ezra, who's in our Discord community, which I kind of added last second. This has basically lessons that you could use, like project-based type stuff and classroom warm-ups that it's give you places to start to talk about AI. Kind of neat. And then finally, we do have one more session on this on October 14th at the same time, 11 a.m. Eastern, which is all about the ethics portion of this. So now that we've kind of talked about the proactive ways to use this and the various ways that this could transform teaching and learning, we also just need to be cognizant of the systemic issues that are related to this, just like we would using the internet more broadly. So that's what that's talking about. And again, we appreciate your donation to make this work free.